During hurricane season, we have a daily conference call with the Hurricane Center at noontime to talk about any kind of activity that we're expecting over the next 5 to 7 days across the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, or the Atlantic Ocean. Once we actually have a storm that's developed, we'll do conference calls with the Hurricane Center every 6 hours. When a storm is actually coming in close to an area, we'll have multiple calls back to back actually. So we'll have a call specifically about where do we think the hurricane watch or the hurricane warning should be. So that'll be one call. Then we'll have another call later on talking about, well, how much do we expect from the storm surge perspective? How much do we expect from the rainfall perspective? How much tornado threat do we have with this particular system? So it's actually a series of conference calls that we'll do throughout a day. So usually the management level of the weather office locally here will be doing that collaboration call, and the forecasters that are actually putting together the forecast 24 hours a day here, they'll be listening in and giving us input in terms of what they believe we should be doing with it. For us, we're just looking at our area of responsibility, which basically extends from southeast Texas all the way to the east to the Atchafalaya River. So we're looking at just our area and what we're expecting in that region. We have, basically free reign to discuss what we think, but we want to have one voice, one message. You don't want the Hurricane Center to say, this is what's going to happen, and then for us to say, well, no, I think this is going to happen. So we collaborate together so we make sure it's the same message. From a Hurricane Center perspective, they're dealing not just with one office like Lake Charles, they're dealing with multiple weather offices along the Gulf Coast. Even going inland, they'll be talking to like the Shreveport office or Jackson, Mississippi office to talk about impacts even for inland areas. In general, the National Hurricane Center is going to defer to us because we have local knowledge of what's the risk area specifically for the population, for governments to do a call for evacuations, how long that would take to get out of an area. So, depending on if you're talking about a system heading towards Houston, you're going to need, over 24 hours of lead time to evacuate places like that. Same thing with New Orleans. It takes a long time to evacuate major urban areas. But the good news for Southwest Louisiana, it's not necessary to have that big of a lead time. So the good news for that is that we can have probably a more reliable, more specific information because we don't need to give it such a big lead time ahead of time. I've been in the weather service since 1990, and when I first got in a Hurricane Center forecast, a one-day forecast back then, it was like what a 5-day forecast is today. So we've gotten that much better. We can forecast 5 days out just as good as what we could for one day out back in 1990. So it's getting better, and it'll keep getting better. That's just the nature of the science field and whatnot.